Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good morning in US. I'm Paz Garcia, professor at the Faculty of Physics of the University of Valencia, and I have the honor of chairing the specialized group of women in physics of the Spanish Royal Physics Society. As you know, we have been organizing these webinars during the last 2 years, and you have access to them both on the group website and our YouTube channel. You know that virtuality is something present in our days, and so thanks to this, we can be together remotely without having to travel. However, it can be a disadvantage because we don't have the contact and the present, but it allows us to hear and see people who are far away, for instance, in Kansas. It's for me an immense privilege to present Professor Hume Felman, which is our invited speaker today. He is a physicist working in cosmology and astrophysics. Before physics came into his life, he was hippie and sailor, as he said, not at the same time. The curriculum of Professor Felman is really impressive. He graduated from the University of California at Santa Cruz, and he got his PhD at Stony Brook University in New York. He was a research fellow at the University of Michigan and a professor research in the physics department at the prestigious Princeton University. Now he is a professor and chair of the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Kansas. He has been visiting professor in many relevant universities all over the world. He's member of the American Physical Society Committee on the Status of Women in Physics between 2019 and 2021. He is US delegate of the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, 7th International Conference on Women in Physics, 2021. In fact, it was at that meeting that I met him in a plenary panel session about men as allies. I was really impressed by his words and commitment to equality and inclusion, particularly in women in physics defense from the point of view of male side. As he says, it's very difficult to be aware of something that doesn't happen to you. Men have to become proactive. So to end up this presentation, I would like to ask the attendees to engage and interact in the chat. After the presentation, we might have also an open dialogue with our speaker. So please welcome to our guest, Professor Hume Felman. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, well, your morning. It's really an honor. So the floor is yours. So you want to share the...
Yeah. Thank you, Paz. I really am honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I must say that I see at least one familiar face, Lisha. Hi, Lisha. I will share my screen right now.
Okay.
Okay, everybody sees the screen?
Yes,
all good?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about being an ally. That's my name and affiliation. I want to start with this idea that it's really, really important. In fact, it's essential to have allies, and allies from all kinds of directions and groups in order to be able to successfully pursue social justice, advances of marginalized groups, and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And most particularly, I want to emphasize that the support and active participation of cis men, meaning white, Christian, straight, fill in the blank, whatever, is particularly important, and mainly because most of the problems that women and other minoritized groups face come from this group. White males have dominated society for a long time, and a lot of the problems that society face come from that. And without their participation, it's going to be very difficult to change anything, because that's the power structure right now tends to prioritize white males, white men. Increasing diverse participation in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math is everyone's interest, regardless of your gender, your ethnic, racial, any other characteristic. And there are lots of studies that suggest that making the participation of women more equitable will also increase our economic output and will be good for the society in so many levels, on so many axes. Gender inequity is not what people call a woman's issue. It's a societal issue. It's a societal imperative. And because of that, men must actively participate in dismantling and rebuilding the system. I'm going to present some slides about various subjects, but this one is specifically why girls don't opt for STEM subjects in schools in general. I think it's very important for us to realize that if you look at physics specifically, and if you look at interest of children in school and then when they go to university, in general, the participation of girls and boys in up to high school, up to kind of around 9th grade, is almost equal to men, to boys. Girls and boys are just as interested in STEM disciplines as each other. But then something happens, and it usually happens around high school. And I give you a few kind of quotes here and things like that, but basically it becomes very clear around that age, around kind of 13, 14, that girls are not as welcome as boys are into STEM fields. I think personally that it happens a lot, at least partially because our high school STEM teachers, and especially physics teachers, are not really, they did not major in these disciplines when they became teachers. Especially in physics, most of physics teachers in high school in the US have majored, if they majored in science at all, they majored in biological sciences, not physics. So they are intimidated by this field. And when you're intimidated by a field, then you try to avoid it, not answer any difficult questions to your students, follow the textbooks directly, and because of that, lose a lot of people on the way. And especially, it's very evident that when teachers are not comfortable with the field, they try to, in some way, protect their students, and especially those students that they believe are most vulnerable, which happens to be girls more than boys, from this field. And because of that, as you can see, the confidence of girls drop precipitously when it comes to about 9th grade. So between 5th grade and 9th grade, that's basically where the drop happens. also in participation, it turns out that about in 8th grade, still you have participation of girls and boys more or less equal in STEM fields, and especially in physics. By the end of high school, there are about 20% girls and 80% boys. And it stays like that for the rest of the career in physics. In physics, about 20% in at least in the US, 20% in college, graduates in physics, 20% PhD, 20% faculty on almost every level. Full professors, and directors and stuff like that, it's even lower, but that may be just a lagging indicator, and it will come up to about 20, but that's where it's stuck. Now here, I just wanted to mention, this is a European study that says that almost half of high school students, girls, do not believe that they are smart enough for their dream career. About a third have been bullied. 80% of high school girls report that guys their age are not respectful to girls. About 3/4 believe that girls are in more competition with each other than boys are. So there are various kind of very troubling numbers here that suggest that society at large and their peers specifically lead to loss of confidence, and mainly these two words that are very prevalent and world over is girls should not be bossy and girls should be liked. Here are some numbers from the US about the distribution of, okay, I lost my thing, I'm sorry. I lost my screen.
Yeah, we see black.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and start again, okay?
Great.
Okay, do you see it now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I have no idea what happened, but here it is, these statistics. So in general, in all fields, PhD is a rough equality, about 47% women in all fields. In the biological sciences, even better than that, about 53%. But then you go into chemistry, about less than 40%, and physics is here at about 20%. Must say that astronomy, which is this one, is about a third. Better, but not good. But physics, as you can see from all STEM sciences, physics is the worst. Computers, it's even worse than computer science and engineering in general. Now, this presents a real serious problem. Now, you can see that all numbers are growing, but they're still very low. Here are some more kind of numbers about bachelor's degrees. And as you can see, physics is sitting at about 20%. When it comes to other minoritized groups or marginalized groups, you can see that some groups are even in worse position. And as you can see, Black, Latinx, Indigenous have even a smaller representation than white women. Here's some more statistics. I will not stay with that too much, but I will give you my PDF and you can look at this. Okay, now I'm stuck. I don't know if you see me or hear me, but I am.
Yeah, we see this woman in a STEM blue slide.
Right, but I cannot move my slides and I cannot stop the presentation. I don't know what's going on here. I'll have to just try again.
Okay. Now.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to try again, see if that works. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Now.
Now this goes through not only in academia, but in industry as well. Women are paid less for the same kind of job. As you can see in engineering, 82%. Well, it varies by country, but that's kind of averages over the Western Hemisphere. And it's very disturbing. And the main thing that we want to do here is not only show the problem, but discuss how to ameliorate, to improve, to redress the underrepresentation of women and other minoritized people. And it requires, I mean, it's a very complicated thing, and it obviously did not start yesterday. And as I mentioned before, underrepresentation starts very early. Around 5th grade, girls and boys are on par, and then things change. And especially girls' perception of their intelligence diminishes as they get older. Their confidence and leadership self-perception declines somewhere between middle and high school level. And it is, I think, critical to understand that these disparities do not simply just materialize, you know, kind of act of God type of thing, but actually it's to do with how we treat them. So again, girls' perception of their intelligence diminishes as they get older. In 5th grade, 23%, or a quarter of all girls do not feel that they're smart enough. By high school, this number is almost half. 33% are afraid to be a leader for fear that others thinking she is bossy. And a quarter of girls will describe themselves as confidence declined to about 25% throughout middle school, from about 60 to 90%. 9th grade, confidence is its lowest point, and then it levels off for the next 3 years. So let's talk about a little bit about what it means to be an ally and what kind of, I don't know, steps we have along the way. To be absent, meaning to be unaware of the issues of general gender inequality. To be aware of the issues, but not fully aware of the impact. Get engaged when asked. To recognize that issues are real, but not really doing anything to support things. And then an advocate, which is seeks opportunities to enhance gender inclusion. So an ally is a person that recognizes that their unearned privileges, mainly I did not choose to be an old white dude, but here I am, and I am privileged just because I am an old white dude. So accepting your privilege and doing something to use your privilege to help and change society is essential for all of us. And because we are privileged, we should use our privilege to become visible and to demand and support and push for tangible change. So basically, allyship includes action and advocacy that is crucial to creating lasting and impactful change. And it's a lifelong practice. It's not something that you do on a Sunday afternoon for a couple of months and move on. So the kind of questions we want to do to address here and in general is, first of all, is it wrong for girls and women to be bossy? Why do girls and women want to be liked? Question to men, how do you perpetuate the bossy, liked expectations for women in your workplace? How do you see a dominant gender expectation influencing how women and girls see themselves and what they can accomplish? How do these same gender expectations influence the negative experiences of girls and women in school, families, and STEM field? One of the most illustrative kind of examples that I can think of is this idea that in college and in high school and everywhere, you know, when a boy or a man walks into the front of the class to the blackboard and tries to solve a problem, and if they do not succeed, then this person does not know, this man does not know how to solve this problem. Very specific to this particular person. If a girl or a woman walks into the blackboard and cannot solve the problem, then women cannot solve problems. It's generalized immediately. When with men, it's very personal and to do with this particular individual. How does a pay gap influence by gender expectations? And how do we perpetuate dominant gender expectations in our workplace? What is one action that you can take starting today that would change, and change is a strong word, but would influence that in some way, even in small scale? What is another action that you can take in the near future that would change that? These are questions that we have to ask ourselves every day. Now, more generally, not only in academia, but in general STEM institutions, as I said, pay women less. So do you think that it will ever be equal between men and women? These are, do you see progress of women representation in STEM affecting the progress of gender non-conforming people? So in other words, we're talking mainly about women in physics, but actually these affect all kinds of equity issues. And we should not forget that the world divides itself into very distinct groups, and some groups are more marginalized than other groups. What do you think will happen if we ask the HR why in companies, and that happens mainly in companies, although it does happen in academia as well, why is it that women get paid less than men? Now, part of it is, at universities especially, part of it is because people in humanities get paid less, at least in the US, get paid less than people in STEM fields. And because STEM fields are dominated by men and humanities are at least equal or dominated by women, that means that women get paid less. And is that okay? Do you think that women in position of power, meaning directors, chairs, various administrators, still face harassment, discrimination, and mansplaining within the workplace, despite of being in a position of power? I think that is undoubtedly, the answer is absolutely. So what can we do to help? And these are questions that don't have specific answers. We have to do it for ourselves and try to figure out how we can help. I showed you some statistics about how number of women in STEM fields fluctuated over time, and I showed you that actually their numbers are growing in general, but we still have a long, long way to go. Now I'm talking specifically about allies, meaning here men. To ask ourselves, how much space am I talking in conversations? Do I dominate the conversation? Do I talk more than anybody else? How can I improve access to resources for all? How is my power or privilege in situations inhibiting others from having space? What do we know about those we seek to work with? They're speaking for themselves, or are we working off assumptions or stereotypes? Who is left behind and why? How willing are we to receive feedback without defensiveness? When somebody comes to us and says that we're biased, usually the immediate response is, I'm not biased. Now, to me it seems, and I don't know you, but to me it seems like all of us are biased in some way or the other. And listening to others' perception of us is a good way to figure out our biases. So we should encourage it and welcome it rather than immediately become defensive about it. So mainly, are you willing to confront and understand power and privilege, be open-minded and able to discuss these norms and behaviors in a helpful and respectful manner? Allyship is founded in a sense of responsibility and awareness, not guilt and shame. Defensiveness is about guilt or shame, and we should try to avoid it as much as we possibly can. Now, being aware of the problem is only the beginning. To affect change, we must be more than just being educated. And we must remember that women are not, their job is not to educate us. It is our job to educate ourselves, partly by interacting with women and listening to women, but in general, it is our job to educate ourselves. Now we have to remember that that women and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color of all genders and intersectionalities must live with systemic injustices that pervade our societies everywhere. The privileged among us that don't even notice these kinds of issues must learn, and we cannot pretend that we're not aware of the biases. And if we are not aware of the biases, it's time for us to do some research. To go beyond passive support into active involvement and courage. And that requires an engagement that may cause some discomfort, expose fear of saying the wrong thing, using the wrong language, and partaking in confrontations. We have to try to feel comfortable about saying the wrong thing. And remember that marginalized groups feel that all the time. So feeling uncomfortable is actually a good step forward. So allyship is not about feeling guilty for your own privileged position, but about wanting to help. Being an ally requires more than sympathy to the cause, more than understanding of the problem, though both are imperative. They are only the precursor of the true allyship. Now, I'm sorry if I sound kind of preachy, but I think preaching is essential right now. Allies must be fierce and take action to upend the status quo. Now, some people use the words such as comrade or co-conspirator to emphasize that allyship is not strong enough for it. The sentiment is real, since traditionally allyship refers to sympathy and understanding rather than active challenge of social norms and biases. So understanding the complexity of the social standing, the built-in hurdles to mobility, and the acceptance by all those who happen to be white cis men is important, essential, but not enough. Active allyship demands action, not only to support those affected, but to dismantle the existing barriers. So suggestions: listen more, speak less. That's always a good idea, especially if you're a man. Engage with other men, intervene in conversations that seek to put down women, establish that it is okay to speak up in situations of bias, encourage men to listen to women, establish that sexism, misogyny is not to be tolerated, ask what the other person needs, listen, affirm, support those adversely affected, pay attention to your own biases, and take responsibility for what is going on in your workplace and for your role in it. Thank you. I'm going to share with you a couple of slides that are around here just because I think they're kind of funny, not because they're connected to anything here. Okay. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing. Good.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much for this night talk. It was great to listen all these words that sometimes we are saying, but to listen to your perspective for your male side, this is quite relevant for us. Is there any question? I can check the chat. I have a question. Isabel, do you have a question? So go ahead.
Good morning. I am now in Canada. Also, I am a professor in the Faculty of Mathematics of the University of Valencia. I have to just say, first of all, thank you. This was a therapy for a few of us, I am pretty sure. And my question is, which is the moment or the action or the fact that made you like change the way you saw things?
I think it's been a process since I started doing physics. I all of a sudden realized that looking around, there are no women. Why? I mean, I did not, as Paz mentioned a little bit, I did not start in physics until I was in my late 20s, almost 30 when I started doing physics. And when I read about physics, it just sounded so fascinating. And so, I mean, has nothing to do with gender. It just is fascinating by itself. And so when I went to school, to undergraduate and then graduate school, and realized that again, about 10, 20% of the people that are my peers are women. And it just, I remember talking about it as undergraduate. I remember talking about it as graduate students. And it seems like all these years that we've been doing this and doing research and stuff like that, and not really thinking very deeply about how to change these kinds of things. And then when I became faculty and realized that this is still going on, which I was not really aware of, although, you know, every place and all my postdoc positions, everywhere that I went, it was dominated by men. And it was very disappointing. So when I became faculty and started to have some kind of a say, I started looking deeper and deeper into it, started doing research, starting to see statistics and things like that. And it just blew my mind. It just wrong on so many levels. And it's a pity because, again, we have such a fantastic field and we're doing such interesting things. It's just a shame that more marginalized groups do not participate in this. So slowly I got more and more into it. I became a member of SACNAS, which is the Hispanic and Indigenous Physics Society, and became the member of the National Society for Black Physicists here in the US, and then started becoming more and more involved in the American Physical Society issues. And it just kind of slowly it became more and more important to me. And when I became full professor, and especially when I became chair of the department, I decided that I cannot just study it from the outside and help on a local level, but try to make it more kind of a global participation.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isa. Good stay in Canada, by the way. Is there any other questions? Licia. Hi, Licia. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you. And hello, Hume. I haven't seen you for a while. Good to see you again, even if only virtually. So thank you so much for this very useful presentation and for bringing this series of action and attitude to our attention. So I have a question for you in terms of practice. I mean, sort of it's relatively easy to read about things and learn about things in theory, and then it comes to a point where they have to be put into practice. And it's somewhat easier to put things into practice when you have sort of time to think. But sometimes you have to put things into practice right at the moment, immediately. And that's, at least to me, is the difficult thing. Do you have any suggestions or any sort of, kind of Swiss Army tools that work for all possible circumstances that one can always go back to in case of doubt or when there is no time to think?
I think that the main thing about this is, like everything else, practice, 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 right? And don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all make mistakes all the time. I know, both from my physics career and in general in my life, the things that I learned most from is when I failed, sort of thing, when I said the wrong thing, when I, answered the wrong question, whatever. And I think that it's really important, and especially from the most privileged of us, white men, it's very important for us not to be afraid of making a fool of ourselves, not to be afraid of appearing to be something that we're not really, but because of our lack of knowledge, because our especially lack of understanding and feeling these kinds of things that women feel all the time, that Black people feel all the time, that are, and we don't feel it. We never experience these things. We're always, whatever we say must be smart because we are white men, right? So my advice to men especially, I am more reluctant to give advice to women, I have to be in some way kind of modest about my knowledge about what it is to be a person in general. I do have quite a lot of experience being a white male. And I think that it's very important for us as the privileged part of society to be willing to put our foot in our mouth, to be willing to say things that we can learn from. In other words, to me, it seems failure is an essential part of success. You cannot be successful without failing. And if you're so afraid of failing, you're not going to try, then chances are you will not be successful. So put your foot in your
this is a marathon, not a sprint. That's what you're saying.
Pardon, say it again.
You're saying that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't worry about the sprint. This is a marathon.
That's right. That's right. If you have power, use it.
Exactly. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Alba Fernandez, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for this very interesting and nice presentation. I'm surely going to send it to some of my colleagues, or to all of them. So my question actually is following what Lysias was mentioning about the communication. Sometimes, for example, when we experience a situation in a conversation where somebody says a sexist comment, something like that, and you tell somebody off and say, please don't say that, it's inappropriate, and so the situation becomes a bit awkward. And for my experience, I would say that sometimes it becomes awkward because you call somebody's attention or says this is not okay. So it's not becoming awkward because of the comment itself, no? So I guess that's this is the problem. So I would like to know, based on your experience, as you said many times as white male, if there is any good tip to communicate this, if you ever experience something like that, like somebody tells you something or explains something in a conversation and makes you think about it, because I guess at the end, what we want is people to think about what they said and don't say that again.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And in general, this is always the question that one tries to figure out, how to be helpful and not make the situation worse, right? There are all kinds of ways of dealing with that, but it all requires practice. In other words, trial and error, Sometimes you will say the wrong thing and make the situation worse. Don't let that make you not interfere, basically stay out of this situation. And there are all kinds of different ways of diffusing a tense situation. One is just kind of, start to talk about something else, change the subject in some way, and then deal with it later on. Try to diffuse it by, I don't know, telling a joke or dropping some. People are just kind of walking around with a glass of water and just dropping the water or something, and then all of a sudden everybody's wet, and people are talking about that, so they stop talking about whatever it is. But sometimes it's really necessary to interfere and say, this is not okay to say. And exactly, I don't think that there is a rule of thumb to tell you this is the way it is. Do this and everything will be okay. If it was like that, then chances are we would have fixed the situation already. So it's a very nuanced kind of situation, and each situation requires different kind of ways of dealing with it. I think the way I think about it is that the main focus that I have is how does whatever it was said or done affects the person it was directed at, and how to help them. The first thing that I want to do is help the people who were denigrated or whatever, dealt with wrongly. That's my main concern. And whether it is to come and say stand between the offender and the offendee, or interfere in some way, or say something specific to that, or just talk to in some way to the victim and say, are you okay? Acknowledge that there is a situation, I think is really important. But again, sometimes, and it depends on the person, I think sometimes if somebody is misogynistic or has some biases about women, for women, it's more difficult to interfere. And for men, it should be easier. But in general, I think the first thing to think about is the victim and how to help them in the immediate thing. And then sometimes talking outside, I mean, just diffusing the situation and coming back to it later on, both in person, just one-on-one, or in general, is important. I think it's really important to, if say somebody is saying something stupid and you go and talk to them later on, it's very important that the rest of the group will know that you talk to them later on. Don't keep it completely private, because then it seems like you're not doing anything. And again, because for me, the main emphasis is to protect the victims, to help the victims, much more than protect them. I'm not this knight in shining armor coming to, protect the damsel in distress. But it's really important to pay attention to that and to try to make the situation better for the victims.
Yeah, that's very important. Thanks a lot for the answer.
Thank you very much, Alba. Is there any other questions for Professor Felman? The audience has other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Eugenia.
Hello, my name is Eugenia. I'm Alba's colleague who invited me. So thanks, Alba, and thanks to UPass for organizing this, and to Hume for the presentation. It's really very interesting for me. And I think that I want to pick up from what also Alba said. I had a lesson on inclusive communication from my inclusive communication specialist, and she gave us some tips. So she said to, for example, share the feelings, so share exactly what we feel when we hear a sexist comment. So to go to that person and don't say, oh, you said this, but say, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe when you say something like this, I feel this way, or this could help. I don't know. I mean, I'm sharing these tips so that I would also love to hear your comments. And also she said to, for example, change point of view. So if somebody says, oh, let's hire all women and as secretaries, for example, sorry about the bad comment, but it's just an example. We could maybe invert it and see the reaction to the sentence, let's hire all men as secretaries. I mean, and see the reaction. I don't know if this is useful or not. I mean, I'd love to hear your opinion on this as well.
I think it's a great advice, and I think that changing gender roles in general makes things so much clearer. This example about hiring a men's secretary, actually we hired a men's secretary here. I thought it was really important to do. But in general, inverting the gender roles to show how ridiculous they are is a great tool that we have, and I think that we should use it as much as possible.
Thank you, Eugenia. Okay, we have from the chat, Friedrich Anders, thanks for the talk and thanks for organizing the seminar and the questions. Some things to digest and a lot of more to do. Yeah, it's right. Isa said that for her the key problem is the silence. Yeah, could be one of the problems. We don't talk about this. So it's nice to talk about these feelings, and this is very, very, very important. Yeah, I have a question. For me, what really something that it's hard for me is that when I said something regarding women in science and in physics, the things that I cannot control is this guilty feeling and shame feeling that has my colleagues, that I don't know how to remove it, because when I say something, they put in the other side and they feel that I am just going against him or them, and I'm just simply making an exposition of the problem. And this, for me, it's difficult to deal with this. Do you have some strategies or some advice how to?
I think that you pointed out to a really difficult issue here. And I think that it comes from what I mentioned before, the fact that men feel guilty for their privilege. And they think, and because of that, they feel, oh, I'm here because I did the work and I really worked hard, and how dare you suggest that it's not like that. And this happens not only in our field, you can see that with politicians and with billionaires and with everybody. Oh, I'm here because I deserve it. And how to deal with this sense of privilege that many people have, and how dare you criticize me in any way because I am perfect. I wish I had an answer for you. You know, this is part of what I'm trying to do as an ally, is trying to convince men that we are not so great, you know, and we are in fact directly or indirectly responsible for most of the difficulties that other people that are not white male, and I hate to in some way suggest that there is one thing, the white male, and everybody else, so no. But this suggestion that we can do no wrong is just so wrong on so many levels, again, that we have to accept responsibility, and how you cannot make me accept responsibility. Like I cannot make you accept responsibility. It just doesn't work that way. I think that just persistence and education and talking to, I mean, people want to be good, you know, people want to do the right thing in general, not all, but many. And we should appeal to that. And it's not your job to help me overcome my fears and my insecurities and my inability to take responsibility. It's not your job, it's my job. And so I think in some way it's my job to help your colleagues that do not accept that, to understand that, not your job. It's not the job of the oppressed to educate the oppressors. It's very important to remember that, especially for the oppressors.
Yeah, but how can you do that? How can we do that? Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you. Wow. Tony Bertolet say thank you very much for the talk. Truly enriching, really. Thank you. Yeah, it's very nice to hear these subjects. And maybe in last question, we are around 1 hour, so it's time to stop. Any other question? Okay, so we thank again.
I would like to say a parting word. Thank you so much again for the invitation and for the honor to be here. Great questions and great audience altogether. And just I want to mention one thing. My email address is hume@ku.edu, Kansas University, ku.edu. If you want to correspond with me or to talk to me or to ask questions or to whatever, I'm available. And my preferred name is Hume, not Professor Feldman. That sounds always weird to me. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much for everybody to join us. Thank you, Hume, really, for your enriching, for these sentences and your work. Really, we will mention you in all our meetings. So, and thanks a lot for being like you are and the example that you give to all of us. So, good luck, and I hope to see you in person someday. Take care, and thank you everybody for joining this webinar. Bye. It will be recorded, so we will put in our YouTube channel.
And don't forget to send me the channel.
Yes, I will send you the link.